Hello and welcome to the first video for Intro to Python. So to get started, you should have an IDE that supports Python. So PyCharm, Sublime Text, or Visual Studio can all work. However, for this series, we're going to be using Idle, which is the IDE that comes along with Python. So you can search up Python and then go to download Python over here. And after you complete the download, you should be able to open up Idle. So I'm gonna be opening up Idle right now. After opening up Idle, you should have a window pop up, and this is called the shell. This is not the space to really write and save our code, but rather a platform to run and test our code. So now we are going to click File, and then New File, and now we have a blank window that pops up. This is where we will be writing our actual code. So this first lesson is going to be about data types, variables, and operators. So a data type represents what kind of data we are dealing with, and there are quite a few data types that are included in Python. So first, an integer, which is basically any positive or negative value that do not include decimals. A string, which is a sequence of characters. A float, which is an approximation of real numbers. A Boolean, which is either true or false. Now these data types can be stored in what we call variables. So for example, we can have variables storing all the data types that were just previously mentioned. So you can have a variable called age. Let's set that equal to 12. You can have a variable called name, and the way and for the name variable we would want to have a string data type, which is a sequence of characters as was stated. And in order to dictate to Python that we want to open up a string, we just have to use apostrophes, or quotation marks work as well. So let's have a name called John, and then we can have floats. So let's make cost, and let's set that equal to 679. And then we can also have Boolean variables, which is either true or false. So let's go ahead and write condition. We have condition set to true. We can also have condition set to false. Now let's move on to operators. So operators are what you basically use to alter the information stored in the variables. So you can have a variable called new age, and you can alter the previous age. Now this creates a new variable called new age. It does not change the 12 that was stored originally in the age variable. So then after that, we can also have a price variable, and let's say the cost 679 is the cost of one apple. It's a really expensive apple, but let's keep it that way. And you can multiply it by 4, let's say, so we're buying 4 apples. And price would be the total price that we would have to pay. You can also find the amount of apples that we just bought. We know it's 4, but let's say we didn't know it was 4. We would just divide by price. You would basically divide price by the cost. And that's the division operator. Next, we have the floor operator. So let's move away from the apples. Let's just say 5 floor div 2. So 4 would be equal to 2 now. So it's basically rounding down. And you also have the modulo operator. So that can basically give us remainders. So if you do 40 modulo, you can do 40 modulo 9, and that should give you 4. And now in Python, you can have the shell read out all these variables to you. So you can have new age being printed out. And what I'm doing here, right here, this is not a variable that we have. This is just a string I just created within this print statement. It's just combining these two entities and presenting it to us on the shell. So let me do that for all of them. Again, to reiterate, this is not the same as this. This is just a string that's being printed out, just so we know that the number is the new age variable that's being represented. This right here is actually accessing whatever we stored in this variable right here. Okay, so now if we go ahead and run this, you would click run, then run module. You can also use Control F5 if you're on Windows, or Command F5 if you're on Mac. So let's go ahead and save this. I'll name it test. And as you can see, we have new age to be 17, price to be 27.16, amount to be 4, floor to be 2, and remainder to be 4. Now let's move on to string operators, what we can do with strings, how we can alter them. So let's say we want to have a variable called full name, and I'll put in my full name, isfar, right? And say I don't want to present it like that. Say I'm first just given, or how about this? Say we have a variable that just has my first name. Yeah, there we go. And then let's say we have another variable called last name. And then we want the full name to combine, or as we call it, concatenate the first name and the last name variable. It's very simple. All you have to do is use the plus operator, and when it comes to strings, it basically just combines the string. See, full name. Now let's print that out. So we see that we don't have a space here. Now there's two ways we can add a space. We can add a space like this, just have an extra space right there, and that'll work. Or you can just put a space here and remove this space. However, according to standard, right, it wouldn't make sense to have a space when you're creating a new variable. So it's so ideally you would want to do it this way. So now let's move on to the multiplication in strings. So you can have the variable called multiname, and you can do isfar times 2, and if you print out this variable, you should have isfar repeating 2 times. So that's what the multiplication operator does when you're dealing with strings. And the last portion of operators would be conversion operators, where you can change the data type of one variable to a different data type. So say you have a variable called cost string, and we want the cost of an apple, but not as an integer or not as a float, but we rather want it to be a string. So very simple to do that. You would just write str, and then within parentheses, you would put in the variable that has the floating data type. And this works for integers, any sort of numbers. So let's go ahead and print out cost string. Yeah, it's 679. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference if it's a string or not because it just prints out 679. However, I guarantee you it is a string. And in addition to that, we also have compound assignment, which is basically the following. It's pretty simple. You can do age plus equals 5. And what we're doing here is we're not using this variable here called new age. We're actually updating the original variable that we created here. And if we print out age now, and let's say we printed out age all the way up here as well. And actually, to know which variable we're printing out, let's have a string saying which variables are being printed out. Let's see. So here you can see that your age is 12, and then we updated it to 17 by adding 5. And you have a lot of compound assignments. You can do minus equals 5, you can do times equals, divides equals. All of them work. The other way to do this would be to simply just update the variable as so. This is just the longer version, but it's easier to understand. And if you print out age again, you would get the same value. You would still get 17. Remember, I subtracted minus 5 here, so that's why it's still 17. It's not increasing. And well, that's it for this lesson. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Hope to see you in the next one.